Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the longest running Bigfoot podcast on Blog Talk Radio, the original Squatchdetective Radio, featuring your hosts, Steve Coles and Chris Bennett. 3 decades of Bigfoot research, 2 decades of Bigfoot radio. Here we go.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
And then this thing walks across the road, takes a turn towards us, and then leaps over a guardrail.
All I can remember is flipping the light on, and I see this creature, and I knew in my heart, I knew in my mind, and the whole night, this isn't a man.
And the whole time, the whole thing was shadowing us, right behind us, right on the side of us. You could kind of see the thing moving through the woods.
There are thousands of perfect people whose word would be good on any other subject who describe getting a good look at an enormous hair-covered upright animal, and that is a fact.
And good evening, cyberspace. Welcome to Squatchdetective Radio for today's date, May 6, 2018. I'm your host, your guide, the Squatchdetective Steve Coles, along with, well, the man who just made it through the finish line, Mr. Chris Bennett.
Hey, Steve, how you doing this week, bud?
I'm good. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, we got 30 seconds, and all of a sudden, like 15 seconds, all of a sudden, your number came up, and I was like,
yeah, we were a little last minute this week, but I had to eat, so.
Well, we know that does happen, and as we hear in the background, the birds are chiming because in my office I have this bird clock, so every hour on the hour it chimes off. So anyway, what a great show we have tonight. We have lined up for us from Small Town Monsters. We have the one, the only Seth Breedlove, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of great stuff he's been doing. The Beast of Boggy Creek, the Beast of Whitehall, the Flatwood Monster, the MOTHMAN, the MOTHMAN of Mount Pleasant. We got so much to talk about. That's just to name a few. But anyway, it seems like spring has finally sprung, which is a great thing. And actually grilled a couple of times outside this week, so I feel good about that.
I'm glad you could finally get the winter coat off,
I know it. A little chilly tonight, but I'll take it. It's like in the 50s tonight, but I'll take that anytime. And I was going to go out this past weekend, but the day I was supposed to go out, we had a tremendous wind, rainstorm, tornado watch, the whole nines, and it was kind of funny actually because a lot of people don't know this, but the beginning of the month we had a really bad windstorm, and the tree took out Stacy's vehicle. And, so we had to get that. We had to get that replaced. She had a Chevy Equinox, 2014, and I'm sitting here at my desk, and all of a sudden I hear, boom, and I said, "Uh-oh, that ain't good." I ran outside, and there's a tree on top of her car, and not a small tree. I mean, talking about one of those ones that's been around for a couple hundred years.
Dude, that's my luck. Yeah, I hate that.
But she managed to get into a brand new, Ford Escape, so she's all happy about that. So we turn lemons into lemonade. So but anyway, speaking of getting lemons, there was a little news story this week that was broke by Lauren Coleman earlier a few days ago. But there was a gentleman down in Arkansas by the name of Keith Barnes, who was posing as a forest ranger or a forestry official, would wear a very forest ranger-looking uniform, claiming he was a cryptozoologist for the federal government. And on his little uniform, he put a little BFRO pin, whatnot. So somebody ratted him out that he was impersonating a federal official. And when they searched his computer, they found child pornography, or at least allegedly found child pornography. So he is in a world of trouble.
Good.
And then the funny thing is I got some hate mail this week. And we love hate mail. we love hate mail. Well, apparently, Johnny Come Lately, the son of Robert Garrett, I don't know if you remember that story I ran last March of 2017, so well over a year ago, about the Big Thicket expedition or something, and they were doing these expeditions for $500 a pop, and well, what happened was the gentleman was running it without a permit, so the feds came in and said, no more, you're done. They warned him once apparently, and then they let him continue, and then they I don't know what the span of time was, but they came back and sorry, you don't have a permit, you're to go, and you're not to come back. So they lost the right to do that, and as a result, people who had paid for a trip in February of, I believe, 2016, you know, they were paying for a trip that was supposed to go off in June of 2016.
Right.
Well, they paid $1,000, never got their money back. And
oh man.
And you know what? These people, I think, really spent, you know, their last pennies just to do it for something as a present. And it never went off. And then he was giving them a whole litany of excuses. Oh, can you give me time to pay it off? And of course, they never saw a dime. So the other day, I get an unfiltered or a filtered Facebook message, because if you're not a friend with me on Facebook, it goes, if you PM somebody, it goes to this special part of Messenger. And there it was, and it was like 11 o'clock at night that I got the message anyway, and it was the son of this Robert Garrett going off how I didn't know I was talking about, and I didn't, well, you know, the funny thing is as I said in my blog, I started that as a private investigation case, not a Bigfoot case. My goal was to try to get this guy to at least make some sort of commitment to get money back to these folks, because that's what they wanted. You know, what I eventually talked to Robert Garrett, and what I got was a litany of excuses, and I don't have the money, and I gave the money to this. Well, it doesn't matter. And what I tried to explain to him was that your name's on the PayPal receipt, so you're the one responsible. And,
right. Exactly.
And that's where the buck stops. If you think you gave somebody else the money, well, you need to sue them. But these people, you're responsible to these people. And in the course of this, I found yet another woman who was from Canada, Ontario, Canada, that also put in $500 for this, and she didn't get her money back. So, but she never really bothered. Yeah. So, and this guy had the audacity to call, you know, to not so nicely call me names, and said I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, I've seen the PayPal receipt, so I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But hey, if he'd like to come on the radio show to try to defend his pop, and I get that, you know, it's your dad, I get that. But if he wants to defend himself, we can give him a few minutes, but not tonight. Well, tonight we have a great guest on tonight, and we want to get to our guest from Small Town Monsters. Who, you know, they have, I can't even keep count, but they've put on so many great documentaries, a lot of Bigfoot stuff, some crypto stuff, some UFO stuff, and now although Seth is not directing it, he's actually producing one that's coming out of Lake Champlain for Champ. So really cool stuff.
Cool.
So let's get Seth on. Seth, how are you tonight, my brother?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on.
And I'm so glad Chris made it. So we didn't get to introduce you earlier, but this is my co-host, Chris Bennett. And
hey, Seth.
You know, and he is from the great state of Kentucky. So, but anyway, let's start with a typical question. Seth, how did you get involved in coming up with this concept of doing films about, you know, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, cryptozoology, stuff like that?
Yeah, so the concept started as a book rather than a film, because my background is actually in like newspaper reporting and stuff like that. I was a freelance writer for local newspapers for about 8 years, and I've always been more of a writer. Although my dream as a kid was to become a filmmaker. But so Small Town Monsters became a book proposal. It was sent to multiple publishers, and it was fairly unanimously rejected by most publishers, by all publishers actually, by every publisher we sent it to. And at some point within the next 2 years following that initial proposal, we decided to turn one of the cases that I had done a lot of legwork on for the book proposal, which was the Minerva Monster, into a documentary film. So we set out to make that in the summer of 2014, and by that fall, actually, we started filming in September, and I think by maybe October, November of 2014, we were starting to get a lot of like newspaper press and radio play here in the Ohio area, and the story kind of continued to balloon over the following months. And by the time Minerva Monster came out in May of 2015, it was sort of I always say it went viral locally. It didn't go viral on like a national scale, although it did make the AP Newswire and get picked up across the country and ran in over 200 newspapers. But the story was definitely on everyone's mind here in Ohio during the time where the movie was coming out. So because of the success of the movie, it allowed me to turn around and immediately start filming Beast of Whitehall. And from there, everything just continued to balloon and sort of cascade until we're at the point now where we're putting out 3 projects in 2018, starting with the Flatwoods Monster a few weeks ago, and On the Trail of Champ in 6 weeks? I think 6 weeks. The first mini-series from us will come out on various platforms, and then this fall or early winter, we're not sure yet on a release date, but we'll be putting out the Bray Road Beast. So we're kind of we're as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the however you want to word it, the paranormal community, the cryptid community, we're the only ones doing what we're doing on the scale that we're doing it at. So it's taken on a life of its own.
That is awesome. Now I thought I saw that Jay Bachochin may actually be part of the Bray Road episode. I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah, we interviewed Jay. He was actually the first interview we shot when we got to Wisconsin. So I think we actually shot his interview first thing on Tuesday morning. So he was the very first person we talked to, and he was a great sort of baptism into the crazy world of the Dogman research that's going on in Wisconsin.
And actually, we're going to have Jay on in a couple of weeks, so that's going to be fun. He's on the 20th.
He's a great interview, great resource on what's going on up there, and it was nice to. His interview was interesting because we were able to bounce it off of Linda's so well, because they both know each other, but also they were speaking quite a bit about the same subjects. So in the film, I'll actually be bouncing back and forth a lot between their interviews. So yeah, Jay is someone I've known for a couple of years, so he's definitely one of the nicer, more down to earth, less abrasive characters I've met in this field.
Yeah, I think we all met at the Pennsylvania Bigfoot camping adventure. I think that's where we all first met each other, in person. And Jay is a sweetheart of a guy, so he's awesome. So you started with the Minerva Monster, and for those there may be folks out there that don't know exactly what the Minerva Monster is. So I'll give you the opportunity to kind of do a little build up on that one.
Yeah, the Minerva Monster case is one that had when we made the film, had kind of been forgotten, even locally in Minerva, Ohio. But the story revolves around this family, the Caton family, who lived off the Lincoln Highway right outside of Minerva, Ohio. And in 1978, their house started being sort of subjected to what you might term harassment from some sort of large hairy creature living on the hill behind their house in the woods. And this included rock throwing and strange sounds, and eventually it kind of culminated with the death of the family's German Shepherd dog, which was pulled out of its leash and its neck had been snapped. And then eventually the creature actually approached the house one night when there was a large gathering of people, came right up to the kitchen window. The Catons, Mrs. Caton, the mother of the house, she actually held a shotgun in the direction of the creature. The creature sort of put its hands up and turned around and walked away off up the hill, and they proceeded to call the police. And once the police had been called, the story hit the newswire, as you would expect it to, and from there the Akron Beacon Journal, which was sort of, I think currently it's like the third largest paper in Ohio, but at the time I believe it was the largest. And they sent a news reporter out to the area. She interviewed the Caton family, and by the within 2 days there was a front page story in the Akron Beacon Journal all about the Minerva Monster. And because of that news story went to the AP Newswire, which, then the AP Newswire picks it up, and newspapers all across the country start running that story. And before you know it, Minerva is being descended upon by scores of drunken Bigfoot hunters with guns, who would park sort of up and down the Lincoln Highway and head up into the woods behind the Caton's house trying to kill a Bigfoot. And the story really kind of took on a life of its own for a few months. There were sightings by other residents of Minerva, and obviously, Minerva is, you're talking as the crow flies, maybe a half hour, maybe 45 minutes tops from Salt Fork State Park, which is, whether you buy into it or not, is considered the mecca of Bigfoot activity in Ohio. So there's definitely a history of Bigfoot sightings in that area. But this story is sort of in my opinion, it's like the Ohio Bigfoot phenomenon in a microcosm. So it's a really fascinating case, and it's still my absolute favorite, or one of my favorite encounter stories, and it's Bigfoot encounter stories, and it's definitely one that I plan on revisiting at some point and hopefully being able to tell. And I don't know if we'll ever get to do something like a remake of the film, but I would love to be able to tell the story again, because there's so much to it that we didn't get to in our film.
Wow. Yeah, there's never enough time. Never.
No, and it was also like one of those situations where we were figuring out. I mean, it was the first time any of us had made a movie, so we were still figuring our way through that whole thing and the process of making it. And in the end, it's a miracle the movie even got finished. So I'm happy just for that.
Yep. Now you started the first one you crowdfunded, didn't you?
Yeah, we've crowdfunded every movie all the way from Minerva Monster
nice.
up till the most recent. And what we do is we actually launch a crowdfunder right around the beginning of every year. And I think with Minerva, we asked for like $500 because we were so nervous that people wouldn't want to back it. And so we asked for $500. I think we made $6,500, and that mostly went toward just sort of funding the post-production on the movie, putting it on DVD, and then getting T-shirts printed and stuff like that. So, and it sort of like informed the quote-unquote business model that we've used all the way up till today. But yeah, every film we do is sort of, it's either crowdfunded or directly funded out of my own pocket.
Right. Yeah, that's Believe it or not, and I've mentioned this on the show, and it's kind of a segue I use to remind folks, too, that I'm actually crowdfunding my first documentary as well. A different tack than maybe Small Town Monsters. I'm actually doing a documentary called Bigfoot Cold Case. And as I mentioned before, it's no secret that I'm doing it on a 42-year-old Bigfoot mystery. Actually, it's a little bit longer, involving the first Bigfoot habituation. And what I've done is use my private investigation skills to kind of figure out who the actual author was. And so that's my first foray. It's this book called The Creature, written by Jan Clement, which was a pseudonym. And, it's down in Pennsylvania, so I got, Eric Altman involved, and Dave Drageson, and a few others. And a few of the locals have come forth to give me some information. So at the end of this road is either a complete story or it's a Bigfoot reigns of a Sasquatch. So that's the fun part of that. We don't know where it's going to take us to just yet.
Sure. Steve, what's the website that your crowdfunder's on? I'll put it in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm using Indiegogo, but they give you a very long, intricate number. So what I always say, if you go to Squatchdetective.com, right there at the top, it has the announcement and the link to the crowdfunding and the first trailer. The little teaser trailer we're running on it. So. But then, getting back to you, Seth, obviously, now that I did my shameless plug.
I am curious, though, Steve. What are your plans? Talk a little bit about the story. What are you going to do? How are you approaching creating it? Are you going to interview the people that were involved in the story, or is it going to be more about your research into it?
A little bit about everything, because we really don't know who the people in the story are, because it's a pseudonym. So I've got a local who happened to, I think he actually pinpointed where it was, and it was just very, very coincidental that he gave me a location, and I satellite shot it, and it looks like the location. So we're going to do some on-location filming, perhaps talking to the landowners. And we're going to do a couple other background stuff as well. Again, it depends on budget, and that's still building, hopefully. And we will go out, do some interviews, do some field work, and actually just kind of unravel it as we're there. And then we're going to go to the place where he allegedly buried the body, and we've got that narrowed down to what I believe is just a couple hundred square yards.
Wow.
So it's really a cool story. And what I did was I took the whole story apart, and then using some background stuff that I can run as a private investigator, I kind of matched the actual person we believe it is to the story. And
what year did all that? What was the actual year that all that happened?
Allegedly, the habituation occurred from 1972 through 1973, and that's when he buried it. The book came out in 75, so we're talking a book that's over 40 years old now. So it was really one of these things that I thought would be really a different take. It's like an investigation almost, but at the same time it's still covering the cryptid. And I actually have another one on the paranormal side coming too, but that we won't roll out probably till next year, mid next year again. So we definitely have some ideas, but it's going to be, a lot of it is going to be based on private investigation as well. So
that's the crazy thing about the way technology is right now is if you have an idea and you're actually willing to follow through with the idea and do the work required, people and pretty much anyone can go out now and at least try to build an audience. I mean, obviously it's up to the person creating it to make something that's of quality, but if you do put something together of high quality, I think anyone can find an audience now, and I think STM is kind of proof of that, because I don't think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we definitely couldn't have done what we're doing now. But even when we created Minerva Monster, we wouldn't have been able to do it, because the reason our audience exploded is because of finding an audience on a platform like Amazon, which wasn't available to us 5 years ago. So.
Exactly, and it's like the time was right. The time is right to do it, and that's why I chose to do it. It's just something that and actually, if you had asked me 6 months ago, I wasn't going to do it. I had no plans on doing it, and then as I started looking at this, instead of doing a breaking blog story about it, I said this would make a really great documentary. So let's do this. And so we'll see. We'll launch the drones, launch the thermals, launch all the fun toys, and get some good filming. Maybe even take in some Bigfoot sightings from the area, some witnesses in the area, and hear them talk about stuff in the 70s when this all started, when this story had occurred, and that's how we're kind of rolling it out. So we're going to actually be storyboarding it next month. So. Because we want to start filming towards the end of July and August, and get into post-production towards the end of September. And we're planning on an April release date, an early release date, but we're gonna try to debut it, and I'm sure Eric will let me. We're gonna debut it at the Bigfoot Camping Adventure 2019, which, believe it or not, that all occurred right in that backyard there. So this whole story comes from that area itself. So really,
cool.
really.
So that's a lot of our filming for Invasion on Chestnut Ridge was done in that area. In fact, we actually, the first footage we shot for Invasion on Chestnut Ridge was shot the day of the last year's PA Bigfoot Camping Adventure. The event was getting rained on pretty hard, and rather than set up, I actually took my camera gear and I went out to an area right up the road from there and shot a bunch of footage that was sort of a part of Invasion on Chestnut Ridge.
Neat. I mean, it's just what a great area that is for so many different mysteries, and I think the Invasion of Chestnut Ridge is, that really says a lot about that whole area, how mysterious it is. But I digress. I want to talk about the other couple that you've done first before we get into that one, the Beast of Whitehall. And that one's close to my heart, because if people when they listen to the intro to this, we actually have a little clip from Brian Goslin when he was on the show many years ago. So
yeah, and I always refer to that movie as my baby, because it was one that I had to fight. Initially, I had to fight just to make it, because the guys I was working with on films at the time didn't think that story would be enough to really fill a film. So we went back and forth on that, and then once I had convinced them to do it, we went and we shot the whole movie, and we got some great interviews with Bill Brand and Paul Bartholomew and Brian, and then we were up there for about a week. We got a ton of stuff, great footage, all that sort of stuff. And then we came back, and then there was a pretty huge creative disagreement over the direction of the film. And in the end, I had to go back to Whitehall and reshoot every single interview from the movie. But I think in the end, it's a really solid, little 40-minute look at that Aber Road case. And I mean, obviously, I watch it now and I see all the issues with it, the technical issues I'd love to fix. But I mean, for a second movie, and really the first movie I'd ever even held a camera on, I'm still really proud of it. But yeah, that case is really fascinating because it involves all those members of law enforcement that claim to have seen, some sort of upright walking, hair-covered creature in this field late at night in 1976? Yeah, I always get confused.
76. Yep.
Yeah, 1976. It's definitely one of my favorite stories. But beyond that, it's my absolute favorite town. We've shot a movie in, and it's my favorite location that we filmed at. I love that location. I love Abear Road so much that I would buy like a house there right now if I had the opportunity.
And it's got history to it too. I mean, that was the place of the Seventh-day Adventists. That's where that whole movement started, right there on that road.
Right.
You know, just a mile or so up the road from that, right on the Vermont border. And of course, you know, that's been my playground for 20 years. That area, the Vermont proper around it, and some of the stories that, you know, you probably not heard was there was you know, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the country club, the golf club. You know, Cliff Sparks. He had stuff that went on in 75. And then they had in the 60s, the late 60s, there was the Gaelic Preserve or the Gaelic Farm, which is in Vermont, but it's right across the inlet to South Bay, which is right off the Pulteney River. And they had actually one of the creatures go up on their porch too. So great area. And you know what? For what you say was technical glitches, I thought it was wonderful. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it took on, that movie took on a life of its own once it came out, and it found an audience. Like the premiere for that movie blew my mind. We were told. So the premiere was in. Oh, geez, when did that movie come out? April. I think it came out April 1st of 2016. It came out. We were filming Boggy Creek Monster a week after it came out, so I think it was April 1st, 2016. We did the premiere at the Whitehall Athletic Club, and I was told by some of the people that were in attendance for the premiere that it was the largest gathering of people they'd ever seen in Whitehall for anything. We had, I think, well, the newspaper, for whatever reason, said there were 300 people there, but it was north of 500 because the athletic club only seated about 375, and we had completely filled the athletic club seats. And there were people sitting up in the balcony, and then there were people standing. I mean, it was just a crazy premiere, so like extremely positive. And then the movie came out, and it found this massive audience on Amazon. It's still one of our most watched movies that we've put on Amazon. And just this past week, someone told me that someone who was completely unaware of Small Town Monsters this person had posted a link to like one of our newer movies, and someone saw my name on there, and they were like, they said, "Oh, that's the guy that directed Beast of Whitehall. I saw that movie a couple of years ago." So like it was someone who had no idea that we even made other movies after Beast of Whitehall. So it's still for some people that's like our calling card. As funny as that seems.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, Whitehall is it's a Bigfoot town. I mean, I was to a couple of the town halls with the Finding Bigfoot crew, and just doing their TV show, and it packed in pretty quick. And they did theirs at the Armory, and I was like, wow, we did one actually in Whitehall, and we did one in Fairhaven, Vermont. And both of those locations filled up very, very big. And it's just that they are interested to no ends up in that area. And that's good for us. I mean, that's good for us as researchers. And obviously, as a filmmaker, that's good for you, too, because not only does it give you a good sizable audience, but for future projects, it gives you some information. So.
Sure, and there are so many sightings up there. Like when we were there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the way my perception of the way Bigfoot is viewed in the area is sort of like people are seeing it. Many people are seeing it, but they don't talk about it because of the I don't know if it's the stigma in that neck of the woods that people just don't want to talk about it, but it seemed to me like most of the people who did, sort of contact me with some sort of sighting had never spoken about it before and never intended to speak about it publicly, because of the fact that their belief was that, the ridicule factor was so high which is interesting because I feel like in a place like Ohio, if someone comes forward with a Bigfoot sighting in Ohio now, it's just sort of accepted as, I'm not saying that everyone believes in Bigfoot, but I'm saying there's a greater acceptance of it here. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think that there is and probably the reason why they spoke to you is because they felt they wouldn't be judged. And I think that really had a lot to do with the 76 Bear Road incident because, after all the media attention, Brian Gosling went through hell, being ridiculed and accused of all sorts of things. And he did. He really paid the price for being public about it. And that's definitely why Dan Gordon, who had a sighting in in the 80s, he had a sighting in the 80s, and he didn't become public to it until really the late 90s. He was anonymous up until 94, but he finally came forward with the Monster Quest that we taped in 2008, and I had known about him for several years prior to that. I've met him several times, and unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago. Because I'll tell you right now, Dan would have been one of those folks in the audience there watching that, and he would have really appreciated that because he felt he had health issues for a long time, and that's why he finally became public with it because he wanted to go on record, and it's just, but yeah, he was another law enforcement officer that had a sighting of one crossing the road on Route 22, which if you go past, if you travel that main road in Whitehall as you go into the town from Fort Anne, you know how it kind of tweaks to the right there, that's Route 4, but if you continue on straight, that's 22, and it was about a mile up the road there he had his sighting. And the funny thing is in 2003, I had actually got a sighting report from two kids via their science teacher, not very far from where Dan Gordon had his sighting. So great area.
Yep, it's. I always joke around that it's like the nexus of the paranormal universe because there's right outside of town. I mean, obviously the Lake Champlain is right there, so you've got the Champ sightings, and then you've got Bigfoot sightings all over the place. But then while we were there, we kept having people tell us about their UFO encounters, and there was a report that Brian told us about of two police officers who had a Thunderbird sighting right across the Pulteney River. So it was always my running gag that you were at some sort of like nexus of the paranormal.
Yeah, I mean, as funny as it sounds, I was with 4 other people, and me and this one gentleman were staying down on this middle mountain. This was over in Vermont, not very far from Whitehall, and we had another team of 3 going up a mountain, and we had all seen it, and from 2 different locations, but we had seen this very bright light. It was in daytime, mind you, too. This wasn't at night. This very bright light come over, hover, kind of move around a little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit up, a little bit down, and then eventually we watched it fly off towards Rutland, Vermont. And then it came back about a half hour later, and it was there for maybe about 5 minutes, and it disappeared again. But we watched this thing for a good 10 minutes, just hovering around. It was not a drone. It was too bright. Yep.
There's no light pollution out there, especially out at like Bear Road. There's no light pollution, so I mean you can see the sky. Like the only place I've ever been in the world where I've been able to see the stars as clearly as I did in Whitehall was when I was in Israel. I mean, it's the only other place I've ever been where there was that lack of light pollution.
Yeah, I mean, and mind you, this was during the day too. Sun was out, and this thing was a bright light in the sky in a light blue sky. So I just, it really was. It was like one of those things, like. So, but anyway, hey, while we're here, we actually have a caller So let's take our caller. Caller from the 585 area code.
Hey, Steve, it's Mike. Wondering if
hey, Mike, how are you?
Seth had his own... Good, brother. I was wondering if Seth had his own sighting at all to get him involved in this. Or I missed that.
No, thanks for the question. No, I have not had any of my own sightings, unfortunately. It's interesting because I've been in locations where, like all this famous activity has happened. I've been on the hill behind the Caton's house after dark with the family, with thermals. Never had any sighting. I've been in Whitehall. I've been on Airbear Road at 3 a.m. And we definitely heard some loud owls hooting at each other, and we saw some deer and stuff like that, but we never saw anything. I've been in the deepest swamps down in Arkansas where the Boggy Creek Monster is supposed to be, and I've never seen anything there either. So unfortunately, as of right now, I have not yet had anything that I can definitively say is any kind of visual sighting. Now, we did have something really strange happen to us. Strangely enough, and this when I say this to people, I try to predicate it with, like, we're well aware that what I'm about to tell you sounds absolutely absurd, but we did have something very odd happen to us in the TNT area in Point Pleasant, where we shot the Mothman movie, and it was in May of last year. We were actually in the TNT area with a Japanese film crew because we shot a TV show with this Japanese film crew, and while we were there, we were in the TNT area really late one night, and Brandon does the music for our movies. Him and I had sort of been walking by ourselves. We were with a larger group, but we were walking sort of back from the group, and we heard what sounded like a rock fall. This is very late at night, by the way. I mean, it's probably 1 a.m. It's pitch black. You're back in the woods. There were headlamps, but I actually think at that point Brandon and I weren't illuminated at all. So we were walking back up this trail in the woods following the group, and there was a rock fall on my right. And as soon as I heard it fall, I thought that was strange. So I turned on my light and went to look for the rock, and Brandon came over to help me look for the rock, and while we were both looking for the rock, a rock falls on the other side of the trail. And this trail runs up through sort of like a mini, like almost like a valley. It runs between two larger hills, so it's running right up the middle of them. So there's these two rock falls on both sides of the trail. We're back in there with this film crew. Brandon and I are both like, more than likely this is someone on the film crew doing something, to elicit a response from us. But as it turned out, the film crew did not want us to pay any attention to this rock throwing thing because they were trying to get us back down to base camp because they had literally set up a guy dressed as the Mothman hiding in these bushes. This is how ridiculous this entire film shoot was. So they're trying to get us back down this hill. So, but Brandon and I weren't having any of it because, like, we were actually having something strange happen, which is like the first time that's ever happened to us. So, like, we're like, no, we're not going. We're gonna stay here for a minute and try to figure this out. So the film crew leaves us, and they go off down the hill and start shooting this next scene. And Brandon and I are up at this area, in the middle of the TNT area, and the crew is completely gone. They've gone off. They're probably 600-700 yards away. They're off down around, this field. They're out in the middle of this field, and we're way back up in the woods. So we're standing there for a minute, and I ended up turning off my headlamp because I was hearing what sounded very much like, kind of like the Ron Moorhead samurai chatter is what I kept thinking it sounded like. But I couldn't tell if I was hearing it or not. I asked Brandon if he was hearing it. He said he was. So I killed my headlamp, and as soon as I killed my headlamp, you couldn't see 5 feet in front of your face. And as soon as I killed the headlamp, something landed in the trail ahead of us. And it sounded like someone had taken a boulder and just like slammed it down in the middle of the trail ahead of us. So as soon as that happened, I took off at a dead run for it. Because it's like my instinct for whatever reason is to like try to figure out what's going on. So I took off at a dead run toward this what sounded like this boulder landing, and like maybe 10 feet into my run, I'm like, I should probably turn on my light. So I turn on the light, and as soon as I do, there's nothing. There's nothing in the trail ahead of me. So I kill the light again. I stop running. Brandon comes running up behind me, and as soon as we killed the lights, like very clearly, right ahead of us, you heard what sounded like weird, very strange, low talking. Really, really weird, like almost like, you know, like a foreign language. And I realized we were out there with a Japanese film crew, so that's a possibility that there was someone that had snuck around or something. So anyway, the long and short of it is we didn't see anything. We just had this really strange experience, and we're well aware of all of the skeptical responses to what we saw because we had them for ourselves. But having said that, one of the guys that was with us, there was one other guy that hung back with us, and most of the guys in our group were armed. There was an off-duty police officer that was in our group as well that was armed. So if you were messing with people in the TNT area in West Virginia, when there's guys that are going to be armed, you're probably asking to get shot. So I did have questions about why someone would do something like that. But that's the only strange experience I've ever had, and I'm sorry for dragging that story out for so long.
Oh, that's
Mike,
thank you. Yeah, I've got a question for you, Seth. You said it sounded like a boulder or something hit the trail in front of you. Was it just one huge, sound like a huge impact, or was there like a big impact and then some small impacts behind it, or just one large one?
No, it was like someone just took a boulder and slammed it into the ground, or something landed in the trail.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I'm gonna tell you, but that's not common. That's not uncommon. I mean,
no,
a large. You know, I've heard something, and I know my friends have too. It sounded like you would take your foot and stomp the ground as hard as you could. Of course, you couldn't make the noise like that, but it sounded like something was stomping its foot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for calling in, Mike.
I think Mike's gone.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep on keeping on. So your next venture was the Boggy Creek Monster, was it not?
Cool.
Yeah, that was that was our first. That was like the first time we felt like we had legitimately made a movie. We packed a crew of about 7 guys, and we headed down to southern Arkansas, and we did our best to sort of. The Boggy Creek Monster kind of tracks all the stories that inspired the 1972 movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, and then it also kind of covers all the not all of them, but a lot of the history that followed that of sightings of some sort of Bigfoot-like creature down in southern Arkansas. So we tried to do, you know, an all-encompassing look at the Fouke monster story, and to a greater and lesser extent, we succeeded. I have many issues with that film as a filmmaker, but I have talked to a lot of people that consider that like their favorite Bigfoot documentary. So apparently, some people like it.
All right. No, I enjoyed it very much. What was really neat was going back to the old Ford home, the actual place where it all came down. That was really cool.
Yeah, the Ford property, the Searcy home, is kind of the home where Lyle, where the film actually ends is like the Searcy house with Lyle at the Searcy house, but the Ford home sits right off of the main road that kind of runs into Fouke, and it's unfortunately been completely bulldozed. But yeah, it's sad. Like a lot of those original locations are gone, or you know the homes have been bulldozed or whatever. But it is strange when you're down there. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed much since that movie was made. There's there's maybe a few less people than there were back then down in Fouke and in the swamps around it, but it's according to everyone we talked to, it's actually very similar to what it was like back when the movie was made. And if anything, there's more sightings today of the Fouke monster than there were, 50, 60 years ago.
And did you find the people more accepting that there was a Fouke monster than, say, Whitehall or any other place?
Now that it's weird. It seemed to be sort of split as far as how people reacted to it. There, like we had people drive up into the parking lot of the Monster Mart while we were there filming, and like one guy pulled in and said it was a prank that someone was pulling, and then we had other people telling us that people were misidentifying owls, and we had one guy like drive through the parking lot and laugh at us and scream Bigfoot isn't real and stuff like that. But we had just as many people tell us that they had a sighting. I mean, that was what was surprising to me. It was the first time we went into the Monster Mart. We had a physician. He worked at a hospital in Texarkana, and he owned property somewhere down in the swamps, and he would go hunting down there. And as soon as he found out what we were doing in town, he kind of chuckled about it. But then he said, one time I was back in those woods and I was hunting and something followed me. And he told us about this experience where something tracked him through the woods, and if he would stop moving, it would stop moving. And he said it spooked him out so much that he got to the point where he left the swamps. And he grew up in those areas. He grew up hunting down there. But he said it happened to him one time, and he's always wondered what it was. And he kind of jokingly said maybe it was the Fouke monster. But you can't walk into the Monster Mart and spend any length of time in the Monster Mart without someone coming up to you and telling about, their experience with the Fouke monster.
Yeah, I remember I was in the Monster Mart, I want to say 2006. Mm-hmm. And I walked in there, and at the time they had a drought. And I'm like, hey, just out of curiosity, are you reporting anything strange? And they were like, nah, they don't usually come out. We don't see too much of them when there's a drought. just as matter of factly, and just went about their day. Yeah, and that's why I was just wondering. I mean, I'm sure I've never. I mean, that's kind of bizarre that a guy would scream Bigfoot isn't real as he's driving by. I mean, I've never had that happen.
Yeah, but, we've run the gamut of encounters with locals at this point. I mean, we've experienced everything from being run off property with threat of violence to people welcoming us into their home and making us dinner. I mean, while we were filming Boggy Creek Monster, one of the families, the Sutton family, we were filming on their property, and they ended up making us all this food. I mean, it was the most southern thing you can imagine. They like basically threw this party for my crew, and made us lunch and everything. And so, I mean, we've run the gamut. The coolest thing that happened to us while we were making Boggy Creek Monster was our first day down there. It was supposed to be a really light day. We were supposed to, we had just spent 16 hours driving from Ohio to Arkansas, and we were all dead tired. It was supposed to be kind of a light day of filming. We were going to the Monster Mart. We were going to shoot B-roll at that property. And as soon as we got there, I walked into the Monster Mart, and the first person I ran into was Smokey Crabtree's son. And he ended up inviting us out to Smokey's property, and we got to film on Smokey's property. We were the first film crew to get to film at that location since Charles Pierce made The Legend of Boggy Creek. And not only that, but there had been flooding. So they took us down Days Creek, and Days Creek, of course, spills into Boggy Creek. And I don't know. I'm sure you've seen it, but the Boggy Creek isn't a very big creek. Like you can't typically boat down Boggy Creek. Right. But because of the flooding, we actually got to powerboat down Boggy Creek because of the flooding. So,
nice.
and we were with the Crabtree family when it happened. So it was kind of like our perfect baptism into that world. And that's how we kicked off that whole film shoot, was filming at that property.
Yeah. And at that point, it doesn't really matter how tired you are. You're like, hey, this is history. Let's do it.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that day we were out there for we probably pulled a 16-hour day, the day that we filmed that first day, because the way our shoots were going was we were up fairly early, but I would actually be working as soon as we got up, kind of offloading footage or getting ready, kind of planning the day out. And then we'd leave, we'd go to the Monster Mart, we'd convene there, we'd get ready, we'd go out into the woods. And that day we were out shooting until well after sunset. And then by the time we got back to the hotel, I had to go back to dumping all the footage that we had seen or shot that day onto a laptop. So it was, every day was anywhere from 12 to 16 hours.
I remember seeing a recent tweet of yours where you say, well, this is how I spend most of my day, dumping the video cards into the laptop. Yeah, that's when we're on a shoot. When we're on a shoot, this most recent, this Bray Road Beast shoot, we got down to Wisconsin, and we right away realized we didn't have enough external hard drive. I actually had to run to a Walmart to buy an external hard drive. And then I mean, this is super probably boring stuff, but we literally will dump memory cards 2 to 3 times to alternate hard drives just so we don't lose footage, because the worst thing you can imagine would be shooting some of this stuff that we're able to shoot and then losing that footage. Yeah. Good thought. So you got to kind of double back it up.
Yeah,
definitely. Seth, Smokey, refresh my memory a little bit here. Smokey Crabtree, was that the old guy that had the bottle tree?
No, that would have been Herb Jones. That Herb Jones was the guy with a bottle tree. He lived in he actually lived on an island in the middle of a lake, and the lake is, the name of the lake is skipping my memory, but they did get to go to the location of Herb Jones' shack. He died. He eventually died.
Oh,
He was a hermit that lived on this island in the middle of this lake, and I didn't get to go. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the island, because what happened was, on the last night of filming, we're convoying down to this boat ramp, but on the way down, the road was dirt, and we had rain for the previous 2 days. And on the drive down, the rental van that I was in got stuck in the mud, and I had to send 2 of my guys with film gear down with Lyle Blackburn and one of his guys, so they could take a boat out and actually go shoot the island. I went to the top of this hill to shoot other B-roll around the area, but it was funny, because it also illustrated the fact that when you're in a place like Fouke, Arkansas, everything wants to kill you. The running gag was everything in those woods wants to kill you, because before he left, Lyle comes back to me and he's like, it's fine that you want to stay up here and shoot. He's like, just be aware there are packs of feral pit bulls. And I thought he was joking. 'Cause that sounds like the most ludicrous thing. And they weren't even gone a half hour, and we started hearing dogs howling in the woods. And sure enough, I guess there are roaming packs of feral pit bulls, because people abandon their dogs, and they run off and form hunting packs, and they'll mess you up. So everywhere we went while we were down there filming, something wanted to take your life.
Wow. Well, I got to say that Fouke, Arkansas was the first and only place I've ever seen a black widow spider.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, ooh. And it was kind of funny. It was in the liquor store. Here's this web, And all of a sudden, I remember taking pictures of it, and you could see it. There was this big bulbous spider with the big red underbelly, and I was like, oh, that's a black widow. And, yeah, that thing will mess you up, too.
Yeah, as soon as the first, when we got to the Crabtree property on that first day of filming, the first thing that happened is we opened the doors of the van. One of my guys stepped out. Jason stepped out of the van, took about 5 steps, and stepped directly over a copperhead snake that was laying in the grass. Like, just walked right over it. So, I mean, yeah, it really was, like, it was one of those situations where I was genuinely concerned for our safety pretty much all the time. And that's not bringing into it the alligators. I mean, there were gators everywhere.
Yes. Yes, there are. Oh, goodness gracious! Yeah, that's some obstacles to to hurdle when you're filmmaking. People think filmmaking is all easy in Hollywood. No, it's hard work. It's hard work for the crew. It's hard work for the people in front of the camera. It's hard. It's even hard work for the people that have to go to the store and get supplies. I mean, it's just it's very challenging. So let's. So after Boggy Creek, what was the next one up? Was that the Mothman one?
So yeah, it would have been Mothman. We were actually, I think we released Boggy Creek Monster on November 11th, and we were filming Mothman by early December of 2016. So 2016 was a really busy year for us. But yeah, Mothman at Point Pleasant, we shot in 2016 and early 2017, and it was released on June 3rd of last year. And it's sort of, it was a no-brainer to make that movie. Like, it was the one that we knew we would make to sort of branch out away from Bigfoot stories, but it was also extremely intimidating to make that movie because there's been so many television documentaries and feature-length documentaries about the Mothman, and it was one of those challenging things where we knew we had to have our own unique approach to that story. So we basically set out to make a movie that would sort of chronologically take you through everything that happened in Point Pleasant during 1966 and 1967, from the first Mothman sightings up until the Silver Bridge collapse. And it came out on June 3rd, like I said, and by June 10th, I believe, it was the #1 documentary on Amazon, which it stayed right around #1, #2 for about 6 straight weeks, which was pretty crazy. It was the #7th overall best-selling movie, period. Best-selling movie on Amazon for at least 2 to 3 weeks. It was in that top 10 best-selling movies on Amazon.
Awesome.
So it's been by far of all of our movies, it's the one that's gained the largest audience, and it's still I think from a technical standpoint we've continued to improve, but the Mothman at Point Pleasant is still probably my favorite movie we've made.
Yeah. And the other cool thing about the Mothman is, thanks to John Keel, the spin-off of John Keel's book, which was the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, with Richard Gere, that thing really gave that national attention.
Oh yeah, and I've talked about it before. That movie, The Mothman Prophecies, the Richard Gere movie, is actually the first movie I saw that sort of introduced me to the paranormal. So, as far as like a reality, like where I think before the Mothman Prophecies, I didn't realize that people believed in things like UFOs. I think in a lot of ways that movie was the movie where it kind of clued me into the fact that there might be a factual reality behind some of this stuff.
See, I think it was a foregone conclusion with me, and I don't know how or why, But many, many years ago, when I was a little kid, I remember my father telling my mother, my father used to work for he was a motorman for the subway. He was a New York City, worked for New York City Transit. And we lived in Jersey. And I don't remember. And I was a little older, and we had moved to New York when my father was recounting this to my mother, and I think my uncle was there too. But it was either way. But he actually remembers coming home from work, and he's right by a dam in Jersey. And I remember reading the story, doing these little UFO. I had as a kid, I had an interest in UFOs too. And I remember reading this story about this big Jersey sighting over a dam. And then my father kind of was like, well, yeah, I was there. And then he said he was driving home one night and he noticed all the people were pulled over on the side of the road, pointing up to watching the lights in the sky dance around. So for me, it was not something that was out of the ordinary. And it was actually my father that I sat next to and watched the Charles B. Pierce Legend of Boggy Creek. And so for my father being such a well-grounded guy, he did have a very open mind to a lot of these things, and I'm eternally grateful for that, because it really gave me the push to do this. And so that's kind of cool. And when you so when you say that's pretty wild that you really didn't give it much thought until you saw the Mothman prophecies. And the fact that, and that movie was very far from the actual John Keel book. It took some, it was just a dramatization, kind of like The Conjuring. Kind of like The Conjuring was to, the actual Perrin story in Rhode Island. So
right.
But
I enjoyed that movie, but I think they took the Mothman story, in a different direction, how it was portrayed. But I'm a sucker for those kind of movies and film projects and documentaries. I love anything with mystery. It doesn't have to be about Bigfoot. I'm especially interested in the Bigfoot stuff, of course, because I was exposed to that mystery too. But I'll sit down and I'll watch Loch Ness, Champy, whatever's on. That's fine. I'm going to watch it.
Right. That's the way with me.
I think it's a fascination with mystery, and I know I'm not alone. A lot of other people like to watch just something about the unknown. It brings up your curiosity.
Sure. And I get asked very frequently why these subjects seem to be popular again. Because I think we did go through a period of time where it wasn't as mainstream to be into this stuff. But it does seem like there's a greater fascination with the strange right now, or the unknown. And I honestly just think it's the current state of the world is generally not great. There's wars and there's terrible stuff going on every day, no matter where you live. And this stuff offers an escape and something interesting, something you can really sink your teeth into and try to figure out for yourself in a world that we have very little control over.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Seth, I think you had mentioned earlier. Oh, go ahead, C.
No, go ahead, Chris.
All right. I was just going to say, Seth, you mentioned earlier your favorite. Was it your favorite documentary or your favorite shoot? Was that the Mothman?
My favorite movie we've done so far, I think, is the Mothman movie. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And that was going to be one of my questions for you, which you pre-answered. Thank you. And
I said, I think it's weird because I have weird. It's my favorite. It's definitely my favorite story, and I'm really even when I watch it now, I'm impressed by our storytelling decisions, the decisions we made from a storytelling standpoint, the way each recreation was sort of told in a different way, I still think the Silver Bridge sequence is really powerful with amazing Grace playing and the footage, that 8mm footage that was taken the day after the bridge collapse. I mean, it's an extremely that was one of the hardest days of filmmaking I've ever done, was editing that sequence, and I did it all in one day. But just watching the cars being dredged out of the river and seeing the family standing on the side, you know, it was that day took like an emotional toll on me. But but yeah, that's probably my favorite in terms of story. I think I'm very impressed by what we managed to do with Invasion on Chestnut Ridge from a technical standpoint. I think that movie showed a lot of technical, you know, like growth in terms of like the editing decisions we made and the, you know, the sound was good and all that kind of stuff. And then with the Flatwoods Monster, I think visually it's by far the most exciting thing we've done. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, that kind of gets me into, you know, I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite location? You know, the place that you would say, you know, oh gosh, I think I could probably live here, you know. And what was your most favorite location and your least favorite location? Yeah, you can get into why if you want to.
Yeah, most favorites definitely Abear Road, because of there was a weird when we were there, I felt like a kid. I don't know how else to explain it. It's funny because Brandon Dela, who helped shoot that movie and was with me, he kind of had the opposite reaction. He was terrified when we were at Abear Road at night, and I was completely in this state of like peace. It was really weird. I just felt right at home there. But that entire shoot was really special to me because it was three of us. It was myself, it was Brandon, and it was my dad. My dad was our third crew member on that movie, and he helped hold our lighting and reflector, and he helped drive us there. So like my dad being a part of that shoot was special for me as well. Yeah. But cool. Whitehall, Whitehall, New York is probably my absolute favorite location that we've been to yet. And least favorite's a good one. You know, like, it's strange. I think, and I hate to say this because I'm not bagging on the town, but Flatwoods was a very strange shoot because of the fact that there's not much in Flatwoods to actually shoot, and most of the property there is private property, so I can't just go up in someone's yard and shoot. And also, there was only one location. There was only one location where anything happened, and that's on private property. So we couldn't even film up there. So there was this strange thing with Flatwoods where I never felt as connected to the location as I did all of our other shoots. So that's the only reason I would say. It's not that I hated filming there. I don't like the town. It's just it's more down to the fact that I never was able to really connect with the location because of the way the town is sort of laid out, and because of the scale of that story. It's a very small scale story.
Right. Yeah. Very cool.
Well, I'll say this, not to ruin anything for you, but you don't want to be anywhere in upstate New York in January or February.
Oh yeah, especially I believe it. We when we premiered the movie there, we premiered it, like I said, it was April 1st when we premiered it, and on April 2nd, Whitehall got slammed with a blizzard on our way out of town. Yep. And so we were like out trying to outrun this winter storm all the way to Buffalo. Because we're coming from Whitehall all the way back to Ohio, so we're driving in and out of this blizzard the entire way back. It was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, we just literally. This is our first week of spring, and it's May.
Yeah.
It was. I remember years ago being up on in the Adirondacks, and we had it was April 13th or 14th, and we wake up to snow. Like, wait a minute, it's mid-April. I mean, we're a month into spring and it's snowing, and that's. Ugh. But anyway, we're New Yorkers. We can take it. So, let's talk about invasion on Chestnut Ridge.
Right.
Yeah. You know that. So, I'll leave it to you to kind of explain the premise of that one.
Sure. Yeah. It's a difficult premise to explain. And it basically revolves around the Chestnut Ridge in southwestern, right? Southwestern, yeah. Southwestern Pennsylvania, which is a 72-mile wide mountain range, or 72-mile long mountain range, where strange activity has been happening going back centuries, probably forever. But our film just kind of takes you through some of the various weird things that have happened along that stretch of mountain range, beginning with the Kecksburg UFO crash in 1965, and bringing you through the weird UFO/Bigfoot cases of the 1970s and 80s, and getting into some really strange stuff like UFOs or orbs and portals and Thunderbird sightings, dogmen encounters, all sorts of stuff. And we didn't even scratch the surface of some of the weird stuff that goes on on the Chestnut Ridge. We based a lot of it on the research of Stan Gordon, obviously, who's kind of the keeper of those stories. But there's been researchers involved in that neck of the woods for decades, who don't get a lot of credit for the work they've. Eric Altman was in the film. He's been up in that area, or down in that area, for a long time, investigating. And a lot of people I know and respect were involved in the making of that movie. And it's like I said, from a technical standpoint, it's one of my favorite that we've made, and we had a great but completely chaotic experience making it. And if you watch there's a making of featurette about the filming of that movie on the DVD, and if you watch it, you'll understand a little bit about just how chaotic it was. We shot the entire movie in 2.5 days. And it was absolutely, just chaos. I mean, I organized it as well as I could, but it's one of those things where you hit the ground running as soon as you get to Pennsylvania, and we never stopped filming. I mean, we filmed for 2.5 days. We shot the entire movie minus some of the recreations. And it's also Mark Matsky, who's a good friend of mine, co-wrote it with me and narrated it. And he's a huge Stan Gordon fanboy, and one of the reasons I made the movie was so we could do something like that together, like have a project to work on together. And we had a lot of fun making the movie, and I think I'm just impressed with how he was able to kind of narrow down that story so well with his writing on the narration, and we were able to tell a really succinct story about a very strange place. And all of our other movies are about a monster in a place, and in Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, the monster is actually the place itself. So that's kind of the Easter egg. If you're looking for a hidden meaning in Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, it's that the Chestnut Ridge itself is the monster in that movie. And that's one where I look at all the work that the team did. Like, not a lot of times Small Town Monsters is called like Seth Breedlove's Small Town Monsters or whatever, but there's so many people involved in the making of these movies, and that movie and the Flatwoods Monster movie are the two movies where you can see the full scope of how many people are involved in making these movies good, or memorable or whatever. And on that one, it's very obvious.
Oh, wow. Now, let's talk about the big one there, the Flatwoods Monster. What's the premise of that one? And I apologize. I actually said I saw Flatwoods Monster. I actually saw Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. I have yet to see the Flatwoods Monster one yet.
I'll send you a link. If you remind me, I'll send you a little, like a screener link if you want to download it or whatever. But
okay,
yeah,
cool.
the Flatwoods Monster revolves around a. I'll just set it up like this. In 1952, September 12th, 1952, there's 5 kids playing football on a field in the tiny village of Flatwoods, West Virginia. They're playing football. They see an object streak across the sky. And I've got a great story that I can tell on your show that I haven't told anyone, that I'm super excited about, actually, because this just happened this week, so I haven't had a chance to talk about this. But these kids see this object streak across the sky. It's seen going over Flatwoods, West Virginia, by many, many people. And it, like, it looks kind of like a meteor, but it is moving slowly, and it comes to a controlled landing on top of a hill, and the hill is part of a farm called the Bailey. Well, it's not called this anymore, but at the time it was called the Bailey Fisher Farm. So the kids start up the hill in the direction of whatever they just saw going overhead, because it was the 1950s, and kids actually had some balls back then, and they wanted to know what was going on. So these kids start up the hill, and on the way they stop at one of their houses, and they pick up their mom, Mrs. May, and one of an older boy who's a National Guardsman named Gene Lemon. The other kids are Neil Nunnally, Freddie May, Eddie May, and 2 other kids whose names I've just forgotten. So anyway, they all start up the hill in the direction of what they think is a downed object. Along the way, they go up this hill. They encounter a strange sort of green mist hovering in the air. The mist gives off a strange smell, sort of like ammonia type smell. They go up the hill and they reach this fence, and when they reach the fence, they start to go over the fence, and as they're just about to go over the fence, they hear a noise and they look up, and underneath this very tall tree, they see a 12 to 13 foot tall mechanical object with eyes. And the mechanical object with eyes, the eyes look more like portholes, and there's 2 beams of light coming at them. And when they first see this thing, the eyes are actually pointed sort of into the sky, and there's 2 beams of light shooting off into the sky, almost like a signal, like it's signaling for something. And the kids make a noise, obviously, because they're startled by what they see. One of them screams, something like that. And the eyes come down and fix on them. And as soon as they see it and it sees them, it starts moving toward them. Now, when it moves toward them, they take off at a dead run. They run all the way back down to the hill, or down the hill to their house, where they proceed to call the police. And like honestly, that's the story. That's the May story. That's the witnesses that were there that night story. What our movie does is it tells the story about not just their sighting, but also the sort of UFO craze that was going on across the United States around that same time. And then it also talks about the history of bizarre craft sightings over that same area of the country, going back decades. And then we also did find a encounter from a local lady who told her granddaughter about her encounter with something that seems to be very similar to the Flatwoods Monster that took place 2 weeks prior to the September 12th, 1952 encounter. But what I wanted to tell you guys about that I haven't got to talk about was this past week. I had a Flatwoods Monster screening at the library here.
We're losing you.
Are you? It's got to be the government trying to shut me down.
Is the audio okay on your end, Steve? I'm losing Seth.
Okay, I got him loud and clear.
Okay. It must be my end. Go ahead, Seth. Go ahead, buddy.
I thought it might have been the government. So yeah, on on Monday of this past week, I did a screening at the Wadsworth Public Library of the movie, and insanely enough, there was a lady there named Yvonne Westfall. She's 80 years old, and she's from Flatwoods, West Virginia, and she actually still owns a farm down in Flatwoods, right across the hill from right across the valley from the Bailey Fisher Farm Hill where the craft would have landed. And she proceeded to tell a story about driving to church with her family on September 12th, 1952. And as they were driving to church, her father said, "What's that in the sky?" He pulled the car over, and the family all got out and watched this strange object flaming streak across the sky and come to a slow, controlled landing on top of the Bailey Fisher Farm Hill. And Yvonne knew all of the original witnesses, all 5 boys, and she actually had a huge crush on Ed May, who we interviewed in our film. She had a huge crush on Ed May, who was, I believe she told me he was a year behind her in school. So she knew all the kids, and she believed 100% everything that they told her about their encounter that night. And she told me these were not the type of people who would make up an encounter with a strange, with a strange unknown being. And she also does not believe at all the skeptical response to the Flatwoods Monster, which is that it was nothing but an owl sitting in a tree. So I thought it was cool. One of the craziest experiences to get to meet her, because she's 80 years old. She doesn't talk about this very much, but her granddaughter had heard about my screening on the radio and invited her. So I got to meet her. She told me that they actually used to play a song on the radio in West Virginia about the Flatwoods Monster, and she proceeded to sing the song. To me. So it was pretty cool. Like this was one of those. Yeah, this was one of those cases where you could just tell it left a huge impact on that town of Flatwoods and the people that lived there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we are coming to a close already, Mr. Bennett. So,
oh man,
time flies. So Seth, besides smalltownmonsters.com, what other platforms can we find these films at? I mean, my suggestion is go over to smalltownmonsters.com and buy the DVDs. That would be my suggestion. But there's other platforms too as well. So
sure, yeah. The DVDs are where you'll actually be able to find like the making of making of like short documentaries in addition to the feature length films that are on the DVDs. We also have like T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. But if you're more into like streaming media, we are available on Amazon. And Vimeo On Demand. Almost all of our movies are available on Vimeo On Demand. All of our movies are available on Amazon. And then Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, Boggy Creek Monster, and The Mothman of Point Pleasant are available on most streaming platforms. So they're available on iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, Xbox, all that kind of stuff. So the only thing they're not available on is Netflix. People constantly want to watch our movies on Netflix, and we would love that as well, but unfortunately we have not had that opportunity yet. So, and if you are a Screambox member, which apparently is like a subscription-based horror movie platform, apparently The Mothman of Point Pleasant, Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, and Boggy Creek Monster will all be available on Screambox.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Seth, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fun talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, man.
And I'm sure you and I's path will cross sometime shortly.
Definitely.
Because that happens. So thanks again for coming on, Seth. Just a couple of quick program notes. Let's see. On next week on the show, we're going to have Justin Chernopesky from Mountain Beast Mysteries. He's a Canadian documentarian who's been doing these little YouTube movies. Some good stuff there. and on Extreme Paranormal Radio, which will be coming up this Thursday night at 8 p.m. We're going to have, the girls are going to have on Chris DeCesare, a.k.a. the Ghost Boy of Geneseo, who was featured on the Sci-Fi Channel when they were on one of their ghost programs. So join us again next week here on Squatchdetective Radio. And on behalf of me and Chris, I want to wish everybody a safe, great week, happy week, healthy week, and most of all, God bless and keep on squatching. We'll catch you all next week.
Thank you for listening to Squatch Detective Radio. Join us each week on Blog Talk Radio, Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern, as your hosts, veteran Bigfoot researchers, Steve Culls and Chris Bennett, bring you guests from around North America, exploring the mystery of the beast known as Bigfoot.